Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders as DevOps programs are implemented across government agencies. With me today on the show are Michael Hermus, the Chief Technology Officer, Department of Homeland Security, John Edwards, the Chief Information Officer, CIA. Vembar, the Chief Technology Officer, GSA, John Morenz, the Chief Technology Officer of Social Security Administration, Mark Ryland, Chief Solutions Architect, AWS, Bill Babilon, Global ITOA Solutions Architect at Splunk, and David Egts, the Chief Technologist, North America Public Sector at Red Hat. We're talking DevOps. I like this topic because we've done a couple shows on it, and I learn things every time because there's a little different twist I think everybody has when they think DevOps and how they're using DevOps. So to me, it's always an exciting one to do. Let's start with John Edwards. John, tell us, cite some examples of where you see some progress being made at the CIA in using DevOps programs.
Thanks, Jim. We've made some tremendous progress in the last few years. Prior to what we put as far as our DevOps factory onto our C2S cloud, we had what we referred to as kind of the wild, wild west. We had developers doing it all different ways across our entire enterprise. Workstations configured differently, dev test and production environments configured differently, and they wonder why we're getting different results. Once we stood up the C2S cloud, we put our DevOps factory on top of that to where now any developer from any of their standard workstations can get to a whole host of DevOps tools. It's consistent, it's configuration managed. They can download that work environment in a couple of minutes and start developing instantaneously, where before it took us months to get a developer workstation online. Moreover, those specialized workstations that we had before were costing me $16 million a year to move them around our enterprise, where today those have all gone away. All the workstations are similar. And configured the same way, so I saved $16 million right up front.
Fantastic.
But more importantly, we're now developing, we've got 8,000 developers on our DevOps factory, on our C2S cloud, and it's fundamentally changed the way we're doing development at CIA.
Very cool, very cool. Michael Hermus, tell us a little bit about DevOps progress at DHS.
Yeah, so we've definitely been focusing a lot of energy in this area generally. I think you probably will hear a similar narrative that you've heard over the years past, which is that in order to do DevOps properly, there are many other pieces that have to fall into place. Absolutely. First of all, we have to be leveraging virtualized infrastructure. We need to be leveraging cloud technologies appropriately, and we also need to be heavily leveraging agile methodologies, right? That's the combination of those two things, and with a generous dose of automation that allows you to get to the DevOps, paradigm. And we're still working across the department on making sure we've got those foundational elements put in place. And we've made a lot of progress on that over the last year. So we're very happy with the fact that folks are really pushing towards agile development. They are really pushing towards cloud-first postures. And we are recognizing that we have to accelerate our ability to deploy more frequently and automate as much as possible. So the progress has been made on laying the foundation and getting the buy-in that this is where we need to go. Right. And we have a few specific programs that we'll talk about later that are trying to accelerate and enable that. But generally speaking, I think we're still, as John described earlier, in the Wild West phase, where there are a lot of different people. Some are accelerating and doing fairly forward-leaning things, and some are still trying to figure it all out. Right.
Well, face it, you're changing the paradigm a little bit. You're changing the way we do business, and that's always a challenge, just getting people lined up and on the same page when you're doing that type of thing. Mark Ryland, how about Amazon Web Services? How are you supporting your customer base there with DevOps?
Well, as you know, Amazon really pioneered in this area with introducing commercial cloud some years ago, and the idea of programmable infrastructure is a really key part of this. If you have traditional physical infrastructure, which you have to deploy manually, and then you can layer some automation software processes on top of that, but to get the full benefit, you really need to be able to program the infrastructure itself, and that's what cloud really brings to the table. So across the government, whether it's DoD, with the CIA, I see customers up around the room. Very exciting to be here to support them in this journey, which will bring much more efficient software development and higher quality and more secure software development to the federal government.
Very cool. I remember the days Amazon sold books.
Still do that.
Navin Vembar over at GSA. Navin, tell us a little bit about how progress you see with DevOps at GSA.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple places that we've done a significant amount of work. Internally in the GSA, we're actually working on setting up pipelines and platforms and processes so that we can get, and our focus has been sort of that speed to ATO. Can we standardize the approach that we have? Can we standardize the images that we're using? Can we standardize all of that work so that there's basic checklists to move forward to get ATOs, and actually measuring that, and going from maybe 90 days to an ATO to to 50, with the goal of being down to 20 to 1, right? As we go forward, and we're starting to see that progress, getting close to that 20-day mark right now for projects that follow these patterns. And then externally, we have 18F in the organization that's working with agencies across the government. So FEC.gov is an example of an 18F project where they really did transformative work, not just within the GSA to use cloud.gov, but externally to help transform that organization that they were serving to a DevOps model there as well, which has been awesome to see.
Very cool, very cool. We'll talk about specific programs here in a few minutes. David Egts at Red Hat. How's Red Hat playing in the DevOps world?
Yeah. Well, the open source way, of course.
Absolutely.
Right?
Why did I know you were going to say that?
Yeah. That's how we roll. And I wanted to build on what Navin was saying, is that whenever people think about DevOps and you think that it's like this new age West Coast sort of thing, and then all of a sudden you bring in government security requirements and things like that, the velocity that you're moving at with DevOps can grind to a halt whenever you're trying to get that ATO. And so I've seen a lot of the cool work that GSA and 18F has been doing around open control, which is an open source way to define how your compliance paperwork is being done, and it can be done in an automated way. And I see that there are two benefits there. One is that it allows you to accelerate the authority to operate process, so you can get into production a lot faster. So time to mission is shorter. But the other thing and since it's an open source project, and Red Hat has been a big contributor to open control with a lot of our content of being able to run OpenShift on top of cloud platforms to get that ATO very quickly. The big thing that we've been focusing on is the automation too. Because when you start thinking about, it's so if you get an ATO in a day, that's cool, but what about your continuous monitoring requirements, right? And so by being able to automate how you do your security controls, you're able to recheck to make sure that you haven't drifted from your configuration baseline. And that's one of the things that we've been working on. And lastly, by being an open source project, think how much government money has been spent recertifying the same workloads over and over and over again, where people are inventing these things in a vacuum. By doing things like open control, where it's done in the open source way, you can get the best minds working together, and it lowers the cost for the taxpayer.
Sure, I agree. John Morenz over at Social Security Administration. Tell us how DevOps is playing and kinds of progress you see being made at Social Security.
Sure. At Social Security Administration, we started our journey down our DevSecOps with Agile. And we stood up our first Agile project, and it was trying to get the culture to change about how to develop software. And then during that project, we realized, in order to be Agile, we needed an Agile environment. So we established what we call the modern development environment in our cloud infrastructure. And that modern development environment is our DevSecOps. And we started to move projects more towards doing DevSecOps in SSA. And today we have quite a few projects running in DevOps.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you to name one or two of those here in just a minute. Bill Babilon, tell us how Splunk is playing in the support of their customers with DevOps.
Absolutely, Jim. Thank you for the time today.
Sure.
Splunk is 100% into DevOps. We're here early afternoon. We've pushed code 30 times already today. We've done that with our mission partners out there. Many here in the room will get into that. But it's interesting. Many folks in the federal space know Splunk for security, and we talked about secure DevOps. We've talked about virtualization in the cloud. Turns out that DevOps is actually one of the major use cases for Splunk. Unfortunately, not many people understand that, and hopefully today we'll shed some light onto that, where we've shown that success in industry and with the government.
Yeah, excellent. We had Splunk on the show a couple times before, and I'm impressed with the breadth and scope of the things you do. You ask what are your use cases, and they're all over the place.
And that's our challenge as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about a specific program. Our audience always likes to hear that you're making progress, but can you talk about a program that you think is going to make a difference. Let's start with Navin this time at GSA. If I asked you to pick a specific program that you think really will make a difference by using a DevOps approach, what would it be?
So one of the ones that we picked internally was the Data to Decisions program. It's our data analytics platform within our organization. We needed to re-platform it into the cloud and transform it as well. And that program was basically the tip of the spear. I always believe in doing something real and small and growing into the larger platforming and a larger approach. And that program, we basically said, okay, we're going to follow this DevSecOps model, as John sort of emphasized. We brought in the security team, brought in the engineers, brought in the folks, built out pipelines so that that team could write out infrastructure as code and create sort of really rigorous processes to get that ATO rapidly, to be able to do deploys repeatedly. And it was great to watch that grow, and also great to see the growing pains. Where did we hurt when we did it?
I'm sure you'll learn a lot. We're going to talk about lessons learned.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'll learn lots from the process.
And that actually has now sort of led us to this larger approach of developing a broader platform for the GSA as a whole going forward.
Very cool. John Morenz, if I asked you to identify a program at SSA that you thought DevOps is really going to help make a difference, what comes to mind?
Well, what's currently going on is our disability case processing system. They're using DevOps. They have automated builds that are being delivered throughout the day. We don't deliver builds to production throughout the day. We deliver builds to production every couple of months, but that's an increase over what we used to do. Used to be we would deliver every 6 to 9 months. Now we're delivering code every 2 months to production.
Very good. Very good. Michael Hermus, how about if I asked you to pick a program that you think DevOps is going to help accelerate or make a big improvement? What comes to mind?
Well, since Mark Schwartz isn't here, I'm not obligated to talk about CAS. So for once, I will say the one that I'm most excited about actually is a program inside of my office, inside the CTO and CIO organization, that is actually trying to develop the standardized DevOps framework for the department. We are also starting small, actually using some of our own internal smaller programs, actually using it as a bit of a development engineering lab first. But the intent is to develop a GSS system that is going to be a common cloud platform that any DHS application can be deployed on. And what we're doing is building on a lot of the fantastic work done by folks at GSA. We are using Open Control, for example. We are leveraging a lot of the tremendous work obviously done by partners at Red Hat. They have a tremendous suite of open source tools like Ansible, right, that we are leveraging. And we are not reinventing the wheel, but we are assembling these best of breed tools in a cloud service provider agnostic and software provider agnostic way to enable future proofing and full flexibility. But at the end of the day, a lot of it's driven by the security stack, right? And I'm glad that we've all standardized on the term DevSecOps, because I keep hearing either DevOps Sec or Sec DevOps or Sec DevOps. So if we're gonna stick Sec in the middle and be done with it, I'm glad to hear that. We believe that security is driving a lot of this, and so automation and the ability to do. And I think the Red Hat folks have this term called deterministic deployments, right, which is basically saying when I deploy, I know it's going to happen the exact same way every single time. That has huge implications for both quality of the software, but also the security, and that is really, really driving what we're about to accelerate the ATO times and ultimately not just deal with the compliance, but really increase our actual security posture, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, excellent. John Edwards, if I asked you to point to a specific program, something come to mind that you think is really cool that...
Yeah, with us, typically we don't talk specific programs, and what Mike just said, unfortunately, we went with Sec DevOps. So we got to be different. But I will say that as a result of what we put in place, the refactoring and migrating our applications would not have been possible without the DevOps factory. So we've got now probably 91% of our business applications have been refactored and are now over to the cloud. That would not have been possible before. As I mentioned earlier, 8,000 users. The code repository has grown to over 75,000 artifacts. That's huge because a lot of that is wash, rinse, repeatable kind of software others can take advantage of, especially if that code has been blessed and ATO'd. You can take that module or that artifact and use it. We've got about 3,000 jobs running in automatic builds pretty much all the time. And as I mentioned earlier, the workstations, our developers download their instance. That happens in a couple minutes. They start developing. They check their code in and out multiple times throughout the day, but before they go home, they usually hit it one last time. and it checks it. If it doesn't break the build, it accepts it, and then it just blows up that instance. And so they don't get charged. I know my Amazon colleagues probably want to hear this, but they don't get charged all night for the instance. And so when they come back in the morning, it's like an alarm clock. We've got a script that wakes it back up and says, okay, here's my instance back again. So to them, it's transparent. It doesn't seem like they haven't left. Yeah. But they come back in, and it's just like they were there when they left last night. And so again, really it's again amazing what it's done for us.
Well done. Bill Egts at Red Hat. Let's talk about if, could you identify a specific program that you think is making a difference?
Yeah, so since Mike won't talk about Mark Schwartz, I will. So they're like DHS has been doing great work when it comes to DevOps, and actually, we joke at Red Hat that it's not DevSecOps or whatever. It's Sec Dev Sec Ops Sec, and that just rolls off the tongue, right? And but it's the alpha and omega. Security is the whole thing that you got to factor in, at development time and at deployment time. But at CIS, that I found that it was really interesting what they were doing, like with OpenShift, and you think about DevOps and it's this three-legged stool, right, where it's people, process, and technology, and just the product is not sufficient, right? You got to think about the people and also your processes. So processes like DevOps and everything. And what was really interesting about what CIS was doing was that not only are they using the products and implementing the DevOps, but they've actually physically reorganized some of the facilities to make it amenable to DevOps for collaboration. And the other parts too is that a lot of times you see these big government programs where you have this big bang to be able to get a program up and running, where what they did was they got a minimal viable product up and running and in production, and they're doing microservices right now, where it's like you get that initial first win, you get the overhead air cover from stakeholders saying that, yeah, they're doing good work, let's keep on going, which is way different than let's wait a couple years.
That's right. I think it's, the day of the big bang is over. I think Navin brought it up too. Start small, show some results, get management behind you, get some support from your customer base, and move forward. Bill, over at Splunk, if I asked you about specific programs, what would you point at?
Oh, absolutely. The one I would point to is one of our DoD customers, Special Forces Command. Very much time to mission there, going in there and helping them with security initially, but really to the point that Mike talked about on best of breed. They went best of breed and they ran into a challenge, and that was visibility. They were integrating a number of products that weren't meant to work with each other, and they used Splunk to provide that UN view, that common view across all of their products, so that as they were working through their automated build process, they could actually see what was going on. To the earlier point about pushing code to production, yes, they don't push it in months like we used to. They're now doing it in weeks. For them, they actually did it where they had a request from the field on a new capability that they delivered in less than 48 hours.
Wow. Yeah, excellent. Mark Ryland at AWS, what if I asked you to point at a specific program?
Yeah, we've already heard about just several of them with our customers around the room, but I'll point out one more DoD example that I think is a really good example. So the DoD has created an organization called the Digital Defense Service, really modeled a lot on 18F and some of the work that's been done in the civilian government. One of the first problems that showed up on their doorstep was an Air Force program, a new GPS system with a ton of software that needed to be developed for the ground stations, something called GPS OCX. And that was a classic government program with problems of over budget, behind schedule. And a lot of that had to do with the inability to write the software fast enough. So DDS actually brought that program, advised the customer, brought that program to the AWS GovCloud, and made a big program turnaround. And so, just a few months later, we had a two-star general on stage at one of our conferences talking about the huge business impact of moving to this agile DevOps model to save a program that was really suffering, a multi-billion-dollar program. So to me, that's a great example of how you can use modern technology.
Yeah. Where DevOps came in to rescue a program that was in some trouble.
Yep.
Good to hear. We want to talk about some of the lessons we're learning along the way, and we'll get into that. But first, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Michael Hermus from DHS, John Edwards from CIA, Navin Vembar from GSA, John Morenz from SSA, Mark Ryland from AWS, Bill Babilon from Splunk, and Dave Egts from Red Hat. We're talking, what are we talking? DevSecOps, DevSecOps, one of those. But anyway, when we went to break, we heard about progress, we heard about some specific programs. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons you're learning as you go. We like to have the program be a service like to others in government and industry that are trying to do the same thing. And oftentimes some of the things you guys are learning, it's very good to pass on to them. So let's start with Mike Hermus. Mike, what are some of the lessons you learn as you move to DevOps approaches?
So, at a high level, I think a couple things come to mind. One, while when we talk about it here, it all sounds like, hey, it's great. We just do some DevOps and everything works wonderfully. We start deploying faster and we get value and everything's great. In reality, it's actually it's non-trivial to make this work well, and you really need smart technical talent to help engineer this. It's hard. It's an engineering challenge. It's also about understanding how software is engineered to engineer the DevOps process to support that. So you need to have some technical talent to help you on that journey. Ideally, if you can get a few smart feds who have that expertise, but you're always going to have to rely on smart partners, right, who have that expertise to help you along that journey. But it doesn't stop by any means with the technical and engineering talent. To be successful here, you have to bring in all your stakeholders across the group. The name is DevOps, ops being a very important part of it. And so what we've realized as we're even in the early stages of our own journey in this DHS cloud factory that we're talking about, we have brought in the operations folks and the security folks and many of the other stakeholders into the process as we're building, so they understand the implications and ramifications of the changes. And in many cases, it changes their operating models very significantly, right? And there's sometimes resistance to that, so we have to work through that as we build this. But if we brought them in after we built, right, at the end of the process, and said, hey guys, by the way, here's how it's going to work, I can imagine the resistance would be much greater, and then we would be in trouble. So that is a key lesson, I think, for anybody trying to go down this road.
I agree. I think that's it's getting all those stakeholders around the table is highly important. John Edwards, what do you think in terms of lessons you're learning along the way here that you'd pass on to others?
So I agree 100%. It is a huge cultural shift, a huge cultural change, and you do have to have all the stakeholders brought in early. And then also, I think as one of my colleagues mentioned, start small. Once you get that in place, take something all the way through the process. Don't boil the ocean, but take something through that's going to exercise all the pieces and parts so people can see a quick win, but a substantive win. And that's, to me, that's probably the biggest thing is to show them how this works. We did a carrot, not a stick. We did that and started showing people, and the developers started coming in. And we didn't mandate you had to use it, but once they started talking to each other, it just was a groundswell. And that's why I said earlier we had close to 8,000.
Wow.
The other thing is, don't try to use all your tools on day one, and it's okay to fail, and you want to fail fast. And so walk away from certain tools or walk away from things that just aren't going to work. And this environment gives you that kind of flexibility to do just that.
Yeah, because you're moving quicker. Exactly. Yeah, excellent point. And thanks for the cultural discussion. This is show 156. Our shows are on technology. 156 shows. Someone brought up culture as an issue. It usually comes up in the challenges area, but you got it sooner. John Morenz, lessons you're learning along the way, pass on to some others.
Well, what Mike said is I certainly agree with. It's figuring out your tooling is very important, and it took us a lot of time to figure that out. A lot of vendors wanted to sell us a lot of tools, but in the end, it would have been nice if we had a reference architecture to go to. We have a saying is you have to go slow to go fast. Right, so it takes a lot of time to get those processes and tools in place and train up the development teams. But as the gentleman at the end said, walk away from some tools. You don't have to do all the tooling at the same time, right? Start small and build and build and build.
Excellent point. Navin, with GSA, what are some of the lessons learned that you're picking up as you go through this process?
Absolutely. So I agree with everything that's been said here, and those are larger things. So I'm going to talk about a couple granular things that we did that were tactical. I mean, at a very basic level, one of the things we did to expose across the teams, including the security team, that engineering teams, the ops teams, was just transparency of work. making sure that everybody could see what everybody else was working on, that we were all in the same stand-ups together, that we're all doing that work. We picked metrics to start measuring and start moving, and their natural metrics that come with DevSecOps. One of them being frequency of deployment, right? But we realized that if we just said the number of times you deploy is your opening metric, we were just never going to get there. We were never going to move that needle for a long time. So we really had to shift back and say, okay, what makes sense here? What should we be measuring? And it became these questions around times to ATO instead. The percentage of our capability that was captured as infrastructure as code, like those sort of things, which are natural things to do now, which we know we're going to grow into the larger and more mature metrics down the line. Right. And those actually have really helped focus our efforts. I've told people, all right, we're going to move these metrics. I don't care how you move them. I don't care what technology is used to move them. I don't care if in some cases there are processes that move them, but move those metrics and get them to the targets.
Excellent points. A way to measure what we're doing and see progress we're making and so forth. Mark Ryland, lessons learned.
I think one thing that's really important in this area is the training and demonstration of concrete outcomes is really, really key. I've been in conversations with customers where we would talk for months about cloud and how you can do everything. You can stand up instances in 5 minutes and you can deploy big clusters, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll be in a meeting and we'll actually show someone, like, we just stood up this whole infrastructure in 5 minutes.
Right.
And they stare at the screen like, wait a second, are you saying that you just launched a cluster in a database and I'm thinking to myself, I've been talking about this for 6 months, and yet until they actually see it with their own eyes, it seems unreal. Yeah. And so for me, an important lesson learned is to demonstrate the technology to your stakeholders, like show them what you can actually do with cloud technology in a very concrete way, and because you can talk for a long time, and it never quite hits home what the possibilities are with the fully automated pipelines, with fully automated deployment. Show people what you can do. Yeah, that's a really key part of cultural change.
System development life cycle that takes we're going to map something out, takes 18 months to get to an actual result. Those days are gone, especially when the kids get in the workforce. They're going to expect things like that. David Egts, what are some of the lessons you're learning along the way here that you would pass on?
Yeah, well, I see DevOps as a destination where people want to get to, but you also got to think about where you're starting from. And very few agencies have pure greenfield. There's a lot of legacy apps that you got to modernize. And so as people go from their traditional workloads that they have to DevOps, we're starting to see 3 patterns emerge. Where as people move along this journey, there's like a lift and shift where it's like, we'll just jam the application in a container, call it a day. You get a quick win, but you really didn't capture, you didn't modernize a whole lot. Then the next step is augmenting with new layers, where it's like I can containerize my application, but I can expose API endpoints for my systems of engagement to be able to tap into. And then the third pattern that we've noticed is just doing a complete rewrite, where we're going to burn what we've done down and then do another rewrite. That is the ultimate destination where you want to go, but that you're not going to get the quick win that we talked about earlier. And so the thing that you want to do, that I think what agencies need to do is when you're starting to look for technology partners to help get you there, make sure that people that the vendor will be able to be with you in the journey in all 3 stages, because you may have a vendor they're going to tell you to burn everything down because all they're selling is the next generation technologies. So make sure that you partner with a vendor that can take you along that journey from containerization to enabling new endpoints to full refactoring.
Right, a roadmap to get you there. Mark, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I think one thing that I've learned along the way, when I first started in this business, people would say, look, I think I'll just do a lift and shift. My messy old application, I'll just put it on your cloud. And I used to think to myself privately, like, well, don't bring your ugly old application to my beautiful new cloud. But really what I've learned from customers is often if you do the lift and shift, it's easier to modernize on the new platform. You have all the tools there. It's easy to stand up a second copy or a third copy. You can actually make faster progress by doing a lift and shift and then modernizing, as opposed to trying to modernize as part of the transition process.
Good supplemental points there. Bill, Babilon, lessons learned along the way.
2 lessons learned. More visibility and less process at the time. And what I mean by that is when we started with this, we were all about visibility into monitoring our internal metrics. To Navin's point, having the metrics that resonate with your stakeholder is huge. and allowing them access to that so they can see as you evolve. That was a surprise. We were looking more internally. The success was when we made our metrics available externally and got their feedback. So that was the more visibility, the less is the process. We've talked about building the process. We've talked about reference architecture. One thing we've learned on our journey is putting enough process in place to meet our needs for tomorrow. And what I mean by tomorrow is that near term, not tomorrow 6 months from now. So that was a surprise. We all wanted to build that end state process, but we had to lighten it up a little bit because as we were moving along our journey, as we were evolving, folks weren't ready for that end state just yet. You know, Mark, to your point, we understood it as technologists where we were going. Unfortunately, our partners couldn't, so we had to walk them along the way step by step by step.
Yeah, very excellent points there, Bill. Thanks. Let's talk about the hard stuff, the challenges, the things that are tough, the things you need to overcome in order to get where you really want to be. Let's start with John Morenz this time. John, what are some of the real challenges you face every day that you need to overcome to get to where you want to be in an end state?
We don't have any. It's all good. So, you know, the challenge, there's just so many challenges. You know, at Social Security Administration, we're sitting on a lot of legacy code, right? And 60 million lines of COBOL. And we're launching a modernization program. And how do you get to nirvana, right? You know you're going to have to live in dual modes, right, for quite some time. And that's really the challenge, is trying to move the organization into a DevOps type of environment, but also keeping a foot in the legacy, because you know you got to maintain that. And lift and shift is pretty hard with large major programs, right? So you got to break them down into bite-sized pieces and try to move the gravity, if you will, over to DevOps one piece at a time. I think that's our biggest challenge, is living in, you know, this dual world.
Yeah, it's like a software engineering thing where you got to break down the big systems into individual pieces and then move those pieces to the DevOps type of approach to modernize. I get it. Navin, what are some of the tough things, the constraints, the challenges that you bump into that you really need to overcome to be where you want to be?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned culture already, so we'll move past that. You know, we just assume that that's all
You
working.
mean everybody just doesn't get on board right away?
Yeah, I know, totally. But I think one of the elements of it, and you sort of mentioned this idea of lift and shift and how that might help, right? What's interesting, right, is actually understanding the value of that speed is actually something that not everybody gets off the top, like immediately.
Right.
And there's a sense and a need culturally and from a skill set perspective to create barriers, to create a sense of safety within the organization. And, you know, and getting past that to say, like, this is actually a safer, more secure way to go if we approach it with this level of speed, because you're doing smaller things faster. Small things are much less likely to put you in you know, a really unsafe state. And really convincing people that we don't need to recreate the sense and feel of putting a machine in a rack. Is really, you know, it's not a trivial thing, and also really adopting and enabling sort of that cross-cultural conversation, and really aligning people out, you know, pulling people out of those silos and into sort of a mission-focused, delivery-focused model, right? In the end, all those metrics that I mentioned a little bit ago are all about delivery to the customer in the end. And so, you know, by saying you're collectively part of achieving those goals, that creates some nervousness, right? Because it used to be that you weren't collectively part of that, right? You just had a tactical target to hit, and you hit it, and the larger machinery around you continue to work, right? But getting people out of that model has been both a challenge, but also, you know, it's been fun to do as well.
Great points. Thanks, Navin. Mike Hermus, what are some of the constraints, challenges, the tough stuff?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so it's trying to drive any sort of standardization and progress from the department level in the combination of a tremendously complex, decentralized, heterogeneous environment that is a large department like Department of Homeland Security. Combined,
all the components just don't line up right away.
They don't always just line up and sleep. Combined with the very, very complex technical environment where there are a tremendous number of tools. The tools and the technologies are evolving rapidly. For example, in our Cloud Factory project, we use 18 different tools right now that we're assembling to make things happen, right? And so the combination of those two layers of complexity, trying to drive progress, is very challenging. challenging. And part of it is, we are looking for areas where we can agree on some common set of either a reference architecture, as we talked about over here, or metrics, because we've actually, as a part of our Agile transformation, we've said, look, we want to start capturing a core set of metrics here, like things like deployment lead time and frequency of deployments, for example. Those are also great metrics to start using to track the DevOps journey, right? You will actually see that when people get to just kind of Agile without DevOps, they'll have one set of metrics, and as they start adopting more automation, those metrics will improve. So finding areas to create common, either common guidance or common technologies that can be adopted around the department is really, really important, but it's been a tremendous challenge for us.
I bet. I remember days back, Secret Service was part of Treasury back in the day when I was there, and I was at IT Executive Secret Service. I didn't want to do anything that the department wanted to do because I had my ways and the department did. And then I became the CIO at Treasury. and now I had to reverse everything, and try to come up with why we should do things in a standardized way, why having agreed upon metrics is important, and so forth. So been there, done that, understand that challenge completely. John Edwards, some of the challenges or the tough things you bump into day to day trying to push these programs forward.
First is just the initial inertia. So I refer to as the government four-corner stall. So people think it was North Carolina, it was the U.S. government that invented the four-corner stall. So some folks will just think they can wait you out. And so, as some of my colleagues mentioned, you've got to get the senior leadership involved around. You've got to get that commitment from the top. Yes, we're going to do this.
Very good point.
Then you got to get your passionate champions involved. But it really comes down to a skills and training issue of reskilling the workforce, both your contractor and your staff base, and putting in place those kinds of things. And that's something that we do a lot, but it just seems like you never do enough, and so it's constantly evolving. So this is one of those things that we're constantly going to be investing in, and that's whether bringing in for certifications and training and websites and brown bags and blogs and you name it, we do it. We have a very aggressive schedule on it, and that's something that I think has made a material difference in getting the workforce to change. But we still have our pockets of people doing what I refer to as agile fall. So they think they got the right terms and they'll use it, but they're still doing it the old waterfall way, and so we got to kind of sneak in and blow those up once in a while and then get them on the right track. But
yeah, excellent points, guys. Bill, Babilon, what are some of the tough things you think are the challenges and the hard stuff to get done?
I'm going to go a different direction. Let's talk about the frustrating part.
Okay.
It is that inertia. It is the fact that, and I'm in a unique position, I cover both commercial industry and government. I know this works. I can point to examples of folks who are literally pushing to production once an hour. It's the frustration of dealing with the inertia that John talked about, some of the things Mike's dealing with the culture and that change, and knowing that success is there, efficiency is there, but getting folks to step out of their comfort zone is really the challenge, and to me, honestly, the frustration. Not invented here. This is the way we always did it. I love the term agile fall. I use the term fast waterfall. It's changing the way people are doing things. That's difficult.
Yep, which to me is back to that culture issue. I said it on the show many times before. I believe it was Robert Kennedy said 1/3 of everybody's against everything, all the time, no matter what it is. So that's the culture battle. I want to hear from David and Mark on this too, but we need to first take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Michael Hermus from DHS, John Edwards from CIA, Navin Vembar from GSA, John Morenz from SSA, Mark Ryland from AWS, Bill Babilon from Splunk, and David Egts from Red Hat. We're talking DevOps. We've been talking about progress and examples of programs and lessons learned, and when we went to break, we were talking about challenges and those difficult things to overcome. We've heard from most of our panelists, but I want to hear from the ones we haven't. Let's start with David Egts here. David at Red Hat, what are some of the challenges that you think need to be overcome to get where we need to be with these programs?
Yeah, so when you think about IT transformation in general, when we talked about this before, it's people, it's process, and it's technology. The technology exists, whether it's Splunk or AWS or OpenShift, and the technology's there. the process is there. DevOps has been around for a while. I think the challenge that we're facing now is a people challenge. We talked a lot about culture here, but I see two things going on from a people side. One is that people call it the silver tsunami of people exiting the workforce, right, where they're retiring, and so how do you backfill all the people that wrote the COBOL code for the SSA, and how do you modernize it? We talk about modernizing applications, but what about the people that wrote those applications and put them in there in the first place, right? Then there's the second part of it of who is you're passing the baton on to the next generation, where you have millennials, right? And we could spend probably a whole show just talking about millennials and trying to psychoanalyze this, but the thing is that millennials want to make a meaningful impact beyond just getting a paycheck. They want to make a difference in the world, and I think the future is bright there, where you have the mission sells for a lot of agencies, where people they want to go out and they want to change the world, and so many of the agency missions are really, really compelling. The other thing is that ties in with this is that you look at DevOps, you look at cloud technology, where it's all open source is all over the place there, and that's what people are learning in schools, and that's also something I think millennials would embrace, the next generation workforce, because not only do they want to make an impact in the organization they're working for, they want to make an impact worldwide, where things like the work at GSA and 18F, where they're open sourcing so much of their code, and it's not just about 18F or GSA, it's making the government a better place and the world a better place.
Excellent point. Mark Ryland, what are some of the tough things, challenges that you think need to be overcome?
We've been talking about speed, we've been talking about agility, we haven't talked about procurement, which is a real challenge in this space. I can swipe my P card, I can stand up a POC, I can spend a couple of $1,000 a month very easily and prove the quality and how I can improve. But now I need to go to production. Now I got to spend $100,000 a month in a production system. How do I do that? Then I have to start all over again. I have to have an open competition. I have to vet vendors who maybe have no experience in this area, but it's very difficult to prove that they don't know how to do this stuff. And so it's very challenging. We've experienced this a lot with customers, of frustration that I've got. I got 50 vendors, the bidding, I got bid protests, I got people, I really don't believe they know how to do this, but on paper, it's hard to disqualify them, actually. So there's a huge problem in that space, I'd say, that we all have to face, and we have to figure out ways to make our procurement processes more agile and more modern and so forth.
Excellent point. Procurement and budget, of course, are implicitly challenges. Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, just real quick on the procurement front. I think you're absolutely right. The frustrations are well known. But on the demonstration front, I think even though it's a well-known fact that the flash procurement didn't achieve the outcome we wanted, one of the successes there was the ability to actually have folks come in and prove that they could do what they said they could do, and not use a piece of paper to evaluate their capabilities. And I think that was on the software development side, but you could use that concept for any number of areas, and I think that's key.
Right. Good point. Another point, Mark?
Yeah, I think I just want to compliment John Edwards and the CIA. One of the most impressive things about the C2S contract was that 70% of the evaluation criteria was based on a live demonstration of capability.
That's excellent.
6-hour live demonstration. Like, don't tell me about cloud. Show me that you actually can
show
do
me
this
results.
stuff.
Excellent point, John.
But it's on the acquisition piece as well, because I think that's huge. That's usually where the wheels fall off the bus, quite frankly. And so, just one specific example, we do a lot of our software development with our contractor workforce as firm fixed price. And initially, our CEOs were like, "What? What are deliverables?" The deliverables are the sprints, and so now we've gone to just buying sprints as deliverables, and we say, okay, this is going to take 10 sprints. We're going to buy 10. We know what a sprint costs, firm fixed price. Risk is on the contractor, but they're comfortable because they bid. And it, again, took our contracting folks a little bit to get their heads around that they were buying something that just wasn't fully defined yet. And we said, look, the product owner is going to help us define what's in each sprint. Then we'll sign off on the sprint, and then we'll get the sprints delivered for this price. And so it's really changed the way we do software development, where we get exactly what we want for the price we agreed upon, and we're not just buying hours, which we did in the past, and we get maybe halfway there, and we have to buy more hours. So.
Right. Excellent point. That's a culture point too. Procurement is used to doing things the way they always did things. So now you're asking them to do something a little different. Okay, we got a little over 12 minutes to go. We need to shift and talk about the future. What's this all going to mean down the road? What's the future look like? How will government improve based upon what we're doing? So we're going to work our way right back down the table here. We'll start with Bill. We each have about just over a minute or so to give me your future crystal ball, what's this all going to look like down the road? Bill Babilon?
Crystal ball is looking at commercial. The commercial world has embraced DevOps and is moving forward and has made the cultural shift overcome these challenges. The challenge for us is getting the federal workforce, getting the federal agencies to move at the pace of tomorrow, today.
Excellent. Excellent point. John Morenz, what's this look like down the road?
So, when I came to Social Security Administration 22 years ago, it's a world-class software engineering organization. We're an internal development shop. You know, my vision is that we continue in that tradition, right, and continue our tradition of being a world-class software engineering shop, using modern technologies at the speed that the commercial industry is doing. You know, we talked about the silver tsunami. That's certainly happening at SSA.
Right.
You know, 50% of our workforce can retire within the next 5 years. Right. So it's an imperative for us to continue the mission, because in the end, it's about helping the American people, right? People that come to us in their darkest hours.
Absolutely.
Right? So
Absolutely.
that's what it's all about.
People need, well put, and it's, you know, in the end, it's all about supporting your citizen customer base. David Egts, what's it look like to you down the road? What's the future look like?
So I think the future is really bright. You know, the technology is here today, right? The processes are here today. The key that we talked about before is people and culture, and evolving to be able to accelerate things, whether it's procurement or if it's just retraining the workforce to be able to do DevOps. I think that's really important. But I think that the underpinning of all of this is going to be open source, and it's not just the consumption of open source products, but it's living the open source lifestyle within the agencies, of people working together across agencies and even with private industry to be able to help the government be much more efficient.
Excellent points. Navin, Vembar, what's this look like down the road to you? Where's this all going?
I mean, so the entire purpose of this is what John said, right? It is about service to the public, and so to that end, right? Why we apply DevOps, why we apply DevSecOps, all of this is actually to create user experience and public experience that's valuable to our public. And so what I really hope to see is that we collapse this idea that government websites can continue to look like they were built in 1995 because they were built in 1995, but actually transformative to the sense that the feedback loop between our public and the people who are building those capabilities is tight and fast, and we're actually able to push out and meet those needs in a more rapid way.
Excellent. Mark Ryland at Amazon Web Services, what's this look like to you down the road? What will government look like as a result of all these DevOps programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I want to challenge a little bit the idea that the commercial world has adopted all this and everything's great. I mean, I was at a customer advisory board meeting a few months ago where we had our top customers from both commercial and public sector, and one of the very intense evening conversations around the table with a very large organization. It's a soft drink company, and there's only a few very large ones of those. Said they captivated the audience with an intense description of how they were trying to get their mainframe apps off of a platform that IBM was finally going to end of life and was going to charge them another $2 million for the new version. And they're like, we got to be done. But they couldn't even log into the system. They had lost their credentials for this mainframe application. So it's everywhere there's legacy, everywhere there's those challenges. The good news, the future, the exciting part, I would say is, I think it's the security is the exciting part of all this, because when you automate these systems and when you build security into that DevOps pipeline, the source of so many security problems in the past has been human error or just configuration mistakes that people have made and just not following best practices as far as basic things like multi-factor authentication, et cetera. All of these huge cyber breaches that we've experienced over the last couple of years almost always involve very simple errors that should have been caught and can be caught in an environment in which you have software doing the checking on the proper configuration of the environment. So I'm really excited about the impact of security on these new processes, because I think it's going to be a huge win for everybody.
Excellent. Yeah, and I tend to agree with you on the comment about commercial and moving legacy. I think where the government is constrained a little bit is the budget and procurement process are a lot longer. And getting innovation into government seems to be harder than getting innovation into the private sector because it can be done a lot faster. But anyway, Michael Hermus, let's talk about what you see down the road. What's the future look like to you? Where's this all going to?
So I think I hope that the big opportunity here is to actually fulfill a vision that I've had since I joined DHS, which is to radically, that this technology tsunami, not the silver tsunami, but the tsunami of technological advancements that many of us consider to be the fourth industrial revolution, is an opportunity to radically transform and overhaul government. It is a unique opportunity to do that. And I think that at DHS, in echoing the sentiments of many of my fellow panelists here, it's the mission. That's why we're all here. It's a national security mission. It is a critical mission, and we owe it to the country and to the public to do the best we possibly can. And it is critically enabled by technology. So I want DHS to be a world-class technology organization, not just to have a world-class software engineering, practice or discipline, because I think that's critically important as well, but for the organization itself to understand how to harness technology effectively to deliver mission and deliver value to those missions. And I think that, we have a unique opportunity with the confluence of all these things that are changing to leverage these transformations and drive that change to better serve our constituency. And I really, really fundamentally hope that the folks around this room, the folks out there that are listening, will take the opportunity to again seize the day and use technology to radically overhaul and transform our government.
Mike, that was a great point. And there does appear to be the government modernization, the Congress law that Congress is talking about. Looks like it has some legs. Maybe we'll see what happens to that, but that might be something that can help too. John Edwards, CIA. What's this look like to you down the road? What's it going to mean for government programs or in CIA programs down the road?
So I think Mike hit it right on. It is all about the mission, and for us, we've had a good run, and we're going to keep our foot on the gas pedal because, quite frankly, we have to. We've got to make sure we can keep pace with this, this relentless pace of technology development. We've got to make sure we've got the architecture infrastructure in place to be able to absorb and, more importantly, apply that. Like I said, we're not done, and we never will be. And so we just got to make sure we've got the right things in place to take advantage of it. For us. As we mentioned earlier, we're calling our Sec DevOps, but that is our next big thing. We've embedded now cyber engineers into our DevOps factory, and ultimately what we want to get to is every 2 weeks, when we finish a sprint, that's ATO'd. So we're ATOing every 2 weeks. And so we get to finish an application development, it's ready to deploy, where now it takes 6 to 9 months of ATO process, after we finish an application. So our big focus right now is to get Sec DevOps fully implemented and operational.
Wow.
So
terrific. I like that. I like the idea of a sprint every 2 weeks too. That's something perhaps other agencies ought to think about. I mean, keep the employees motivated by having sort of these goals that you try to meet.
One last thing to echo Bill's point is we want to make ourselves look more like commercial. That's one of our biggest challenges, is not to make our commercial vendors and our partners look like government, because that just doesn't work real well. So we really strive to try to make ourselves look more like commercial.
Excellent point. Well, as I always do, I try to do some summarization of what we heard here today. Took some notes while you folks were talking. First, along progress, we heard a lot about where DevOps, the use of the cloud, use of tools, and more trends towards attempting to standardize on the tools and the metrics being used. We heard about leveraging Agile and doing things that can accelerate development. More standardization going on, standardized checklists to get to ATO faster, and clearly all about time acceleration. All of you talked in one way or another when talking about progress of accelerating time. On challenges, we talked about legacy code. There's still a lot of old stuff out there that needs to be somehow broken down so that it can be migrated to a DevOps environment. We heard about getting agreement on common sets as a challenge. We heard agreement on metrics. We heard the importance of getting top management on board. We heard the challenge of reskilling the workforce because we're doing things different. And we talked about the millennials coming on board with totally different expectations, I guess, than some of us that are on our way, that have careers are near their end. And we heard about procurement and budget challenges. Specific programs, we heard about data analytics going to the cloud. We heard about a case processing system, security drivers being a big part of these programs, and code artifacts to be reused. And you get a series of code artifacts that can be then reused across the agency obviously for efficiency and speed reasons. And when we were talking about specifics, again, everybody brought up the time to mission, and I think John brought it up. It's the time to get the support to the actual customer of government or the citizens. When we were talking about lessons, we heard we need smart partners. And we need all the stakeholders at the table. This is no longer just the IT guys. This is the stakeholders all working together on these programs. Culture change is something that has to be kept in mind and has to be dealt with in governance processes around culture change. What came across loud and clear is start small. You know, we don't want the Big Bang Theory anymore. We don't want to promise something will be delivered in 18 months or 2 years. We want something that we can show results. The showing of results gets to buy-in and leads to further backing for the program itself. We talked about the transparency of work, that having everyone aware of what's going on and what each other's doing is going to help everybody move towards those common goals. We talked about common metrics and getting certain metrics that can be used to measure progress as we're going through this. And we heard about roadmaps that can be used to replace that lift-shift stuff. We need a roadmap that sort of is a continuum that we can build on and continue to move and grow and continuous improvement. And visibility. When we talked about future, we talked reduced risk, commercial, world-class commercial world, government becoming like it. We heard about better government services, overhauling government, and in general, I heard about improving lives for generations to come by having these better programs in place. With that, I want to thank our panelists for taking time for your busy programs, your busy work, to be with us today and share your ideas. I want to thank our sponsors, without which we don't have a show. I want to thank the good people here at Federal News Radio who always make it very accommodating for us to do the show. Of course, my partner at Trezza Media, Tom, and most importantly, our listening audience who tune in and listen to the show each month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.